Well, hey, Cornerstone family, we wanted to come to you today and just sit down with Pastor Mark and Pastor Travis and have a conversation about what's happening around Cornerstone, and thought it would be wise as one of the new members on staff here, newest to the story of Cornerstone, to sit down and hear a little bit of the backstory, whether you've been here for a long time or maybe you're new like me, to hear some of the story that has leading us up to a decision that is before our church on November the 20th. So just curious, here we are sitting at Cornerstone Church at our Old Town campus. Guys, how long has Cornerstone been in Old Town?
Really since the beginning. I mean, church was founded in 1902. It's been on this corner, like the building we're sitting in is the A-frame, and it's been on this corner for decades. This building in and of itself that we're sitting in here was built in 1976. We're sitting in the loft. So this used to actually have pews, and you could sit up here. And I used to sit up here when I first started coming to the church. I used to sit up here for the services. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about. And then there's people that Ethel Probst, who was a part of the church, or is a part of the church, she was baptized in, I believe, the building before this one, which dates back into the 40s and 50s. Okay, wow. So, yeah, it's got a pretty big history here in Old Town. Yeah.
And what about the other structures? I think everybody's familiar with, our worship center, but our kids' space, and even, the house that a number of our offices are in. How old are the facilities? Yeah,
so the worship center they built in 2005. 2006 was the year they moved in. Okay. In June of 2006. The kids space was just built throughout the 80s, and it was built in like 3 different phases. So they initially had put one building over there that wasn't really connected to this one, and then they added onto the back of that building to connect it to the A-frame, and then they went vertical with the second floor. Okay. So and that was happening all throughout the 80s. It didn't happen in just one time. It was several years in the making. So, yeah. Okay.
So, Pastor Mark, you have not been here since 1902.
No.
So, but no. How far back does your journey with Cornerstone go?
2002. So, okay. Yeah, 20 years ago, my wife and I were looking for a church, and this is where we wound up. We had some friends from the community that were going to church here, and we wound up here just through a different series of events, and started getting plugged in. That was really important for my wife and I when we first were looking for a church after we'd been married for a couple of years. We wanted to find a place we could plug in, and we had visited several churches and never found a spot to actually serve and get involved and do something other than just attending on a Sunday. So yeah, 20 years ago.
Wow. Yep. Travis, how about you?
I've been here since 2016. In June of 2016,
Father's Day weekend
was really my first. We came for a couple of weeks prior to, and got to know people, and then we're away for a bit, but really our start was Father's Day weekend.
Yeah.
2016.
And Travis, since you've been here, you've been here for a shorter amount of time than Pastor Mark, but there's been a lot of change that's happened over even the time that you've been here, right?
Oh, complete change. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. The worship center in and of itself looks completely different than when I first came. We've totally revamped that. We were a part of building a portion of that front stage. They made it better than what we did, but we were part of that. We were part, when I got here, I don't think I had an office because we were building an office.
We were renovating the current office. The old office, which I think was built, that house was built in the 60s or 70s, I think. And it had the old wood paneling, the little thin wood paneling on the walls, and not much insulation, and
you could hear everything.
The electrical, didn't have a ground wire, so we had all this equipment in there, so we had to redo all the electrical, and we were in the middle of that when Travis started on staff, so we were all just sitting wherever.
Yeah, wherever you could
find a
land.
place. Yeah.
And just hearing the Cornerstone story, there's been a lot of that, right? Make it work,
Yes.
you know, and
That's
there's
exactly
been a
right.
lot of making it work that has happened over the years. What's been, if you guys wouldn't mind sharing some stories, what have been some of the difficult things that you've gone through at Cornerstone? I mean, besides space and capacity and retrofitting things, it sounds like pretty regularly. What have been some of the difficult challenges over the last few years?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the hardest season was like 2014. So late 2013, early 2014, there's a pretty big exodus of people in the church. And it's not the first time that it happened since I was a part of Cornerstone. It's just the first time it happened when I was in leadership, right? So it happened the first time when we actually moved into the worship center, which was supposed to be that permanent place, and we were supposed to see growth. But the reality of it is, in 2006 when they moved in, there just was this huge decline in attendance during that season. But in 2014, we really saw that same thing happening at the very first part of the year. And by the end of the year, we had just gotten to this place where, we were running maybe a couple hundred people on a Sunday morning. And it was a very difficult season because we lost a bunch of folks financially. We struggled a good bit during that season. We had any kind of reserves that we had in the bank. We had gone through that. I don't want to paint a picture of like, well, we were about to go under, because that's really not what it was. But just like a lot of families live paycheck to paycheck, the church was really operating offering to offering. Like that's just how it was during that season. And we had an elders retreat. We had elders in the church for a couple of years at that point, and we were at an elders retreat, and we just made some really pivotal decisions during that weekend. And they were really difficult decisions as well, but it's a great group of guys. And one of the things that really came out of that was just this decision, one, that we were going to be a contemporary church. Up to that point, we had really tried to really please people. So we were in two services at that point. We had we had what we called a contemporary service, so that was more of a blended worship. And then we had a traditional where we were trying to actually have a choir and do some things like that. And all throughout that year, it just proved that it didn't work and it didn't go well. So we came out of that weekend, and that was one thing we had decided. We were going to become a contemporary church. We were going to stop having two services, and we were going to have one service. And then the third thing that came out of that was we were just going to commit to a season of prayer. And what we did, and this was happening, I think, even when you got here, Travis, I think. So this was probably almost a 2-year deal where we met every Sunday morning before anybody else got on campus. And it was whoever was here. So it was mostly a few staff members and the elders, any of the elders that could make it. And we would meet, at like 7:30 in the morning. And, our service wasn't until 10 o'clock. But we would meet first, and we would pray. We would just be on the floor on our knees before the Lord for, however long it was that day. And we would pray. And really our prayers were God, we're asking you to, one, provide for the life of the church. That was a big thing. As we were seeing us going through this time where we're living offering to offering, it was, God, one, provide for the church. But two, the other thing we really began to pray was that God would do something that would only be given glory to him, right? That it would be his story in it, that it wouldn't be anything that we manufactured or anything that we really could figure out on our own. And we prayed that. We prayed it week in and week out. And we got about halfway through 2015 even, and we really began to see this change. And almost an excitement that we hadn't seen before. And it was interesting because I remember it was like July of that year, and we were still struggling some financially, and there was this financial gift that came in, and it was like a $10,000 gift from somebody that we were not anticipating, and it completely shifted like the year for us. It was just that one thing. And then throughout the next, couple of years, we would get a gift like that every summer. And we still don't even know who the people were, you know? So it's pretty remarkable how God just started working in that. But man, 2014 was tough. You got a bunch of people that leave. And in 2015, of course, we went through a name change later that year. And so that sort of compounded all of this stuff, right? So you've already lost a bunch of folks. And it's like, well, now you're going to change the name from First Baptist Bluffton to Cornerstone Church. And, whoever may have been holding on at that point, it just seemed like they left. And, but it allowed us to have a fresh start too. So that was just sort of the way that God worked all that out for sure. Yeah.
So you're able to lead folks through that journey of transition and change and into even where we are now. Yeah. Right. And so lot of lessons in there. There's been a lot of change.
More than I'd like, probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change. Sounds like in 2014, we are all forced into change significantly in 2020. We continue to be in a season where we're anticipating there's going to be more change, which is why we're kind of sitting down having this conversation now. I know my wife and I, we visited Cornerstone for the first time back in May. And as we drove into Old Town for the very first time, we were struck by the beauty of the Old Town area, the prominence of the church down at this location. And since I've been on staff here for the last couple of months, it is a wonderful place for ministry, a platform for ministry, but it is incredibly limited. And so I'm wondering if you guys could just speak to, I think people see the beauty. I don't know that they feel the limitations. And so what are some of the real limitations that we are facing that are really forcing us at this point to look at potentially something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, parking becomes probably the first one that most people feel. Yeah. Right. Most people feel the parking issue on a Sunday morning. We're on 3.24 acres here in Old Town. We have how many spaces? You counted spaces. What were they?
I think it's 118 is what we have.
So we have 118 parking spaces. There's some road parking, and people do take advantage of that when they're able to. There's one lot that's down the street that we have permission to use. And so but that's just an issue. It's just one of those things where you look at the building sometimes and you even feel like the building's not full. But it seems like week in and week out the parking lot's at capacity. And that really becomes one inhibitor of growth for us is the parking lot.
I'd speak to that. Yeah. Even this past Sunday, there were 303, I think, total on campus in the first service. That was 240 somewhere in there, inside the worship center. And I walk out each time coming from the back so I don't interrupt preaching. And so I'm walking out and I can kind of see where, and it was slammed full. And you walked inside and you can see chairs, yes, but it still feels full. And we know, we've discussed this many times, we know that there's just a cutoff. There's a percentage, 70 to 80%. If that's how many are in that room, whatever it can hold, it's about like 400 probably comfortably. Yeah. Then, at 80%, we're full, and it doesn't matter if it is full or not. Right. That's what's going to happen, and that's what we feel. That's where the tension is, and that's what we're struggling with. We're like, how can we get past this? We hit that 240 a lot. And it's not about numbers. That's not what we're talking about. We love every one of those numbers. Those are people, and we appreciate that, and we're grateful, and we want to serve, but we want to get more. We want to have more people come and hear the gospel, come and have their lives changed, and go into the community and make a difference. That's our goal.
Yeah.
And so when you limit, like you said, that's so well said, it's just that there are limitations, and you see it, you feel it. And when you're here every week, as we are on staff, not everyone comes every week, but we're here every week, and we see all the different ups and downs. And so we understand the limitations that come with that parking crisis that really is. It's just, we can't ever get over that hump.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think if you look at the number of parking spaces, that really does become your cap. You know, even though you might be able to work around finding additional parking in other places at different times and some things along those lines, but if you have 118 spaces, or even say you have 140 that you can secure on a Sunday, like that's a number of people that you can fit on campus at one time. Right. And that really becomes a bigger issue than even the space in the buildings, because you can't park them. And so if you can't park them, you're not going to be able to fit them in the building. You can have 400, you can even put 450 or 500 seats out on a Sunday. And the reality of it is you're never going to get, consistently, you're not going to get 300 people in the room in the worship center, because the parking lot's just in complete disarray at that point. And it just causes issues. And so there's limitations with parking. But the other thing is like just ministry space in general, right? So like you think of ways that we want to serve the community. So we launched our mobile food pantry in 2021 last year. We did that, and we found a closet. Like we literally found a closet that we could put it in, and we've done the best we can with that. But man, the need is so great, and our volunteers have been amazing. They've stepped in with 30-something folks, are delivering groceries to people in the community. I mean, it's just an incredible thing to see happening. But it's also one of those things you look at and go, what are some of the other opportunities we could have to serve the community if we had a different space? Because we're so limited here. Classroom space. When you started here, Travis, we had, we had Sunday school. We had a traditional Sunday school model. We had both. We had some small groups. We had a traditional Sunday school model. And we've quickly, going into like 2017, 2018, you just quickly run out of classrooms when you do have kids ministry meeting like it is. Right. And so there's not really any adult small group education space that could potentially be used for discipleship or things along that line. When we have different requests coming in, we have one group that meets on Sunday mornings in the conference room of the office. We have Grief Share that's trying to figure out how they can start after the first of the year. So some things like that are good to have on campus, but we're very limited on being able to find a spot for all of them. So but yeah, I mean, just things like that, and then you're always trying to fix something. I was talking to my daughter the other day, right? So my kids all grew up in the church. They grew up in Old Town. So our conversation even today is, Dad, what are you doing? Like that's what they're asking me. And it's hard because I'm a creature. I love change. I love things to be different. I've lived in like 30 different houses in my lifetime. I move often. I change my office often. Like I'm just a creature. I like change. And so my kids are asking me about this, and that's one of the hard things you look at and you think, man, my kids, I first renovated the nursery here long before I was on staff, because Addie was born, and she's 19 now. So 19 years ago, we're trying to figure out how to, make the nursery a little bit better. So that's kind of my background. And so I step into that, and man, I've done that so many times around here, just trying to make the space work for the need at the current moment. Right. And I think we're always going to have to do that in some space. But when you have adequate space for growth, that you can actually reach more people, because that's really one of the things that we would be able to do with space, is we can reach more people for Christ, but with that we also get to help them grow stronger. I think that's a big thing that Cornerstone does well, is we help people grow stronger in their faith. And having a resource of space, just allows us to do that in a better way.
Yeah, I've seen everything that you guys are describing just in the few, first months of being here. There's a mismatched space, large worship center that can accommodate a number of people, more people, not enough parking.
Right.
Even if you're begging, borrowing, stealing, whatever you're doing, walking in, busing in, whatever that might be, there's a mismatched space. Yeah. It also sounds like there's missed opportunities that are happening in ministry as well.
For sure.
And so we're at this crossroads right now. And so some people might be wondering, we've had conversations like this. So what do? Do we continue to retrofit our current location? And so I'll just ask you guys, is it possible to further maximize this campus? And I guess the answer is probably yes. I'd love for you to answer that, but at what cost could we build this campus out even further?
Well, if anybody won the Powerball, then for sure, we could
call us first.
We have some needs.
Yeah.
I think we joke, and we've joked in the past. All things are possible to him who believes, right? We know that's in the scriptures with the birth of Jesus. That's part of the story there. But the reality of it is, with every thought of what we could do here in Old Town, you're going to run up against a limitation on space and parking. The parking really is going to, at some point, it becomes an insurmountable obstacle just for growth. Now, if the church, if the church says, hey, we want to be a church of 600 to 700 people here in Old Town, and that's it, then I think we're fine. That's where we are right now. We're going between 550 and 650 basically on a Sunday, just depending on who's here. And so if that's it, then great. We can stay and we can help those 550, 650 folks and grow stronger in their faith. And but it's really going to be limiting in terms of some of the other ministries that we would be able to do, and opportunities for the community and serving folks, and whether it's discipleship stuff that we miss out on, just different opportunities. And then you also have to take into consideration, we're in one of the fastest growing areas. I know we're in one of the fastest growing areas in the South. We may be in one of the fastest growing areas in the country. And do you really just want to say, well, no, Lord, we're content with just the 550, 650. And I've said this in some of our meetings, I think if I look back at 2014 and I remember that season, and even Travis, when you first got here, 2016, and I think we're just getting ready to go into 2 services, maybe that fall. It could be.
Yeah, that's right.
And if that's it, if that's all that the Lord, is going to do, then that's more than I would have ever imagined or dreamt of 8 years ago.
Yeah.
When we're at an elders retreat and we're talking through some of the things that we were talking through. But the flip side is I also don't believe God's finished with Cornerstone, right? I don't believe that he's finished with the work that he wants to do through the church. And if a building's holding you back, then maybe it's time for us to consider what's next. And that's really the conversation we've been in for, probably 5 years, 6 years, is just been okay, we see that there's a limitation coming if we really want to continue to reach folks and help them grow stronger in their faith, lead them into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And we started seeing that. Travis and I we first went out to the farm in late 2016 after he'd been here for like 6 months. and we're just talking about the limitations we see in Old Town, because parking was an issue even way back then.
Yeah.
And so we went out there and toured the place for the first time. I knew it was there. It existed. I used to live somewhere near there, so I'd driven by it 150 times, but we actually got to take a tour of the place, and we're sitting there just going, oh my goodness, this is pretty amazing space when you get there.
So let me just stop you right there, because you just mentioned the name, the farm. So what is the farm? A couple of people have heard that and might be confused by that, might be really confused by even the name of that. Where in the world are we headed? But can you guys just describe what is the farm?
Do you want to go?
You know the details better than I, but let me just say this. The farm is, when you drive into it and see it for the first time, you go, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And you see it. Like you can see the vision.
Right.
It's not hard you don't have to try to really conjure up something. The vision is there. When you see it and you're like, oh my goodness, we could do so many things out here. The space, let alone, he'll tell you the numbers, but the space is incredible. The structures that are already in place are well done, and we're pretty positive they're in great shape and can hold up and are ready to be added onto and make it into the church, and it's incredible. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was like, let's go. Let's do this. But we didn't have the funds. We were in debt. And but we're both dreaming. I mean, that was easy. That wasn't hard to see that and have to figure out a dream. The dream was very visible right there. It's like you could touch it, you know?
So what is it? I know another term that we want to talk about is the 7 Mile Miracle, which is a term that's been out there. If you're new, what is that? Like I am, my family is.
Yeah. So the farm is basically a spot. It's 39 acres that a gentleman built really as a professional horse riding arena. And so it's not like a farm like crops and stuff. We just call it the farm. And so it has this huge, basically covered riding arena. It's about 150 feet wide and it's 350 feet long. That's kind of the first structure that you see when you drive up. There's a big lagoon. It's like a 7-acre pond or something like that. And then you see that big riding arena that can be converted into basically worship ministry type space, multi-purpose space. With that, there's an additional building was built for stables for horses. Some of that's been converted into some classroom space currently. Behind that, there's about a 4,000 square foot house that has some meeting rooms that are already able to be used, and it has some additional office space that can be used in there. Commercial kitchen, big commercial kitchen with a walk-in fridge freezer type thing. And then there's a maintenance building out back that has loft storage and there's just a lot of space. And the gentleman's been trying to, he's had it listed for sale for a lot of years. It's never really functioned in its fullest potential, at least over the last probably 10 or 15 years. There's been some different groups that have gone in to try to do a few things, and none of them have really made it. And so he's been sitting on it. So we went out there in 2016. We got the grand tour. Like, we went into every building and opened every door and just he showed us everything, told us the story. I think we were out there for a couple hours with him, and he was just telling the story of him building that place. And he came to faith in Christ actually while he was building that. Wow. And so, we're out there, and this was 2016. So 2017 rolls around, and we get into a vision night in 2017, and we start talking about just kind of this what's next for ministry for us. And there were probably 70 people in the room. There wasn't like a massive number of people, but we were dreaming at that point about what was next for ministry. We just really believed God was doing something. And a couple of people actually stopped me after that vision night, and they started asking about the debt. And it was the first time people had started asking about the debt that the church had, because that's part of the story that most folks don't realize. So in 2006, when Cornerstone, at the time it was First Baptist Bluffton, when they built the worship center, they also had about $2.25 million worth of debt. Fast forward a couple of years, and when I became the senior pastor, our mortgage payment at that time was $22,000 a month. And so, when I talk even in 2014 about living offering to offering, well, a big chunk of that, we had paid off some of that by that time. 2014 rolls around. We had refinanced one time, but we were still at like a $12,000 or $14,000 a month for debt. Wow. And so somebody at that vision night in 2017, they asked about the debt, and we actually decided we were going to put together a group of folks, and we launched our first capital campaign in 2018. In the first part of 2018, and our campaign was called Unafraid, and I was going back and I was watching the video of it this week, and I'm proud of myself. I look a lot thinner than I did in that video, so yeah, I feel good about that. But what I realized was we were talking 5 years ago now. 5 years ago, we were talking about. At that time, it was a season of preparation. We felt like there was another season of ministry that God had for Cornerstone Church, and this was our season to prepare. And in order for us to be prepared for whatever God had next, we had to deal with our debt. And so we launched the capital campaign. We were actually just shy of $1.5 million in debt still in early 2017. Or 2018. That campaign wrapped up in 2021. It was a 3-year campaign. We reduced the debt by a little more than half. I think we still had about $600,000 when we wrapped up that campaign. And then we basically immediately went into another campaign that we thought would be 18 months. We actually thought the next campaign would end next week, November 14th was the target to end it. Wow. And we would be debt-free November 14th. Well, we became debt-free in February of this year. Like, it was about half the time that we thought we would need. And so again, we're just, okay, God's doing something. And that's kind of where we're at. So I think it's a long answer to your question about the farm, but we've known for years that there's something else on the horizon. It just is becoming clearer and clearer that seems to be the farm, and the season seems to be now. Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's crucial to say, please hear us. This is not something that we just dreamed up last week,
right?
Or a month ago. It literally has been going on. I'm glad that I was able to be a part of it. That was really cool, because I was right in on the beginning of it. That's when I got here. I'm still green to this area, not knowing very many people, and we see this, and we're like, my goodness. I remember going home and telling Amy, it's just like, let's go. I'm driving you out there. I'm going to show you this. She was blown away. Anybody that came in town, we took people there. I mean, that's how excited we've been about this place. And there have been ups and downs, and we have every time we've been, okay, all right, God, I get it. It looks like the farm's off the table. It looks like that's not going to happen. Okay. And we would just wait, continue to pray. God, will you do? But this is not something that we just dreamed up like that. It's not. And I think, if you're new, if you're coming in new, you could go, wow, I just got here. I love this church. Trust me. Again, the church is not a building, but wow, that is a really cool place out there. You need to see it. if you can be a part of that, I think that will shift your thinking and allow you to dream a little bit bigger.
That's cool.
On what he's going to do.
Yeah, and I think about, I mentioned Vision Night 2017, where we really got to that place of getting ready to launch that campaign. And so we go through 2018 and we're in that capital campaign, and we're talking about what's next. We come to a Vision Night in early 2019, and we started dreaming of what we called the 7 Mile Miracle. So 7 miles is basically the distance that the farm is from where we currently are. Okay. The entrance off of May River Road is 7 miles from the four-way stop in Old Town.
In which direction?
It would be heading west.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out kind of towards the New Riverside area
towards
that way.
The circle,
okay.
Towards the going to the opposite circle.
Okay.
Just before you get to the circle out there with South Carolina 46 and 170 New Riverside area. And so it's 7 miles. So we call it the 7 Mile Miracle. And what we did was we had this Vision Night, and it's a great night. But kind of as a surprise, I think we had 120 people at that Vision Night, and we actually got some trolleys and we drove everybody out there. And so we go out there. We had permission, and we hang out for a little bit. People are walking around, just really excited about the possibility. And then we spend, after that night, we spend the next 7 Sunday evenings out there prayer walking the property. And we did that, and we get to the end of it, and really we're ready to move forward. So we get to a business meeting later in the year, and we actually vote in late 2019. The church votes and decides that we're going to list our current property in Old Town, and we're going to pursue the farm, the 7 Mile Miracle. And we begin that process. We meet with real estate agents. We interviewed them. We had a group of folks that were helping with that. We settle on one guy, and we get pictures taken of our Old Town campus, and then March 15th, 2020 hits, which, if you know the calendar, that's
the world knows.
The world shut down. So we had worship services that morning. That was a Sunday. And we had worship services that morning, and by the time we're leaving church that day, they had canceled school for the next day and the next week, and everybody thought it was just this short-lived thing. And of course, we all know what happened. But anyway, during that season, we just hit pause. We just didn't, because we weren't sure of what we were going to do. We just felt like we needed to hit pause,
right?
And so we did. And after that, we don't even know what rebuilding looks like and recovery from COVID. Like, nobody knows.
Right.
And so we didn't really pursue anything else. We just felt like that was a pause button. And honestly, during that season, we really felt, I felt like the farm was just off the table at that point. It was, off the table because there were some other things that were happening, and, we were just trying to figure stuff out here in Old Town as it was. So we just kind of went through that season and just trusting God. We said I would lead a lot, and I would talk about being open-handed, and we're just trusting God for whatever's next. And we're not presuming anything. We're not saying He has to do anything. We're just saying, okay, God, we want to be available, and whatever that looks like for You, whatever that looks like. And that was, goodness, I think that was like a year and a half of talking like that. We started 2021 talking about surrender, and really even up until a few months ago, like that palms up thing has just been a big part of how we've been talking.
Yeah. And now you take that story and you fast forward it up to this fall. We're going through a series, and we're talking about what makes us Cornerstone. We are Cornerstone, and we're going through our values. On the heels of that series, we enter into a month of praying together. The possibility of an offer coming through, and in the final week of an entire month of praying, 4 days prior to the conclusion of that praying, two things happen on that Wednesday. Mark, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So we're just praying over that. What's next? We believed that we were going to get an offer, but we really thought that was coming long before it came. But at the very end of this month of prayer, we finally get an email, and it actually has the signed offer from our neighbors across the street. And it was just one of those things where it's like, oh wow, like almost surreal. Like, do I really have it? Is this is this actually happening right now? And but then the other thing that happened, which was really interesting that week, is because we were talking about providence. We were in a series on Joseph, and we were talking about providence. That's the message I was preparing. I was texting you that day, and I get a message from the gentleman that owns the farm, and he had somebody that was interested, and that whole thing fell through. And he was just in an interesting fashion, just very humbly asking if we are still interested, and because the other place that was looking at it was not interested. Are we interested, or have we moved on? And I just was able to respond to him in that moment, like, we've not moved on, but we're just in this season of prayer. If it's okay, I'll reach out to you when we're finished with this season of prayer, and we can get together and meet. Wow. Yeah. So
here we are. We have an offer that we are strongly considering. We have a piece of land 7 miles from where we're currently located that we're strongly considering as a place for relocation. Final two questions for you guys that I want to ask. First of all, as we're talking about relocating, you're leaving a place where you've seen God do tremendous things. What would you miss about being in Old Town and on this campus in particular?
In a humorous way, I would miss the food, because it's right here.
It's right across the street.
But that is not the only thing. Right. But it is great. We have lunch meetings with people all the time, and it's really nice to be able to just walk over there with them and to have community, build community, and meet. I mean, there's been serious meetings. There's been humorous meetings, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But I mean, that's a cool part. But I remember when I first got here, and I see this little white church. I mean, it's not small, but it's this little white church, and it's beautiful. And I'm taking pictures and sending it to all my friends, going, "This is where I am now," right? And I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and I still do. When the farm was not on the table, and we were talking about the sale, I was like, I don't know where we're going. I don't know what you're doing, God. I see you. I see you moving, but I don't know. Where do we go? I mean, we talked about it. Financially, I mean, what can we do with just though it seems like a lot of money, it's not a lot of money when it comes to building. And you're like, what do you have for us? And then it's back on the table, and I'm like, now there's no doubt in my mind. When that wasn't on the table, I had some doubts. I'm not going to lie, because I was like, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't move. And I think Pastor, you were thinking the same thing. Like, I don't know, I'm okay if maybe we are going to stay here. But when I dream, and I'm allowed to dream, and the vision, I'm like, to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Even though there have been miraculous, awesome things happen here on this place, I know that he's a God who wants to do more, and he's always wanting to do more. And so I can't just sit here and go, well, I'm just going to hold on to this, even though I love it here. I can't. I've got to be open. He's so right. I mean, I've got to be open to what he's going to do, because there's more people that need to know him. And this community is hurting, and the community is in need, even though they don't know it. They may be financially set and all these things. There's needs, and they need him desperately. And what we're doing is we're actually moving closer to some of those housing areas that are out there, and the ability to reach so many more people. It makes sense to me. And so it's like, Yeah, will I be sad to leave here? Absolutely. But at the same time, I know that I have joy in my heart about what he's going to do. And the vision and the dreaming is it's real. I mean, I see it, and it makes sense. And he's going to do more than I can even hope or imagine. I think you're preaching on that here in a couple of weeks. But I mean, he is that kind of God, and that's who we serve. And so I can't hold fast to a building and a place, because I know that he has something greater. So it's there's going to be some tough times about leaving here, because it is, and he's going to speak to that more, I'm sure, because he's been here.
Yeah, I mean, I think through, like, I mean, you're talking 20 years of history for me and my family. You know, my wife and I have been married for 2 years, basically, when we joined the church. So, I mean, our marriage has been formed here. It's been formed, you know, really in ministry here. You know, I started preaching regularly August 3rd, 2008 was the first Sunday that I began preaching after the previous senior pastor had retired. And this was before I was the senior pastor. So I've been preaching basically in the worship center over there, you know, for 14 plus years, most Sundays. My kids have all come to faith in Christ, you know, as a part of ministries and people who have been involved in their life. They've performed in the worship center when we've had different kids events through the years. And, you know, I mean, it's a place for us as a family that, I mean, it's a place of significance, right? Like, my kids are asking about it, but at the same time, you know, I want to live open-handed about that type of stuff, because the things that I've experienced and my family has experienced through Cornerstone and are the things that I want other families to experience. I want more families to experience. You know, I want more kids to come to faith in Christ. I want more marriages to be formed through the ministry of the church here. And I just believe that we are better able to do that with a different space than we currently have, especially when you're talking about how much our community's grown in 20 years. Yeah, you know, it's remarkable. So, you know, I would miss kind of the quaintness of it, like this little old town. Like, I know every nook and cranny of these buildings, and you know, kind of the joke through the years has been like I'm the guy that knows where the water meters are, and you know, those types of things. I look forward to not knowing those things, honestly, and you know, a guy named Brad Carlson, letting him be the guy that knows all of those things. But I think that, you know, you talk about the building's not the church. The building really is just a resource that God gives the church. And you're the steward of it, right? You're the steward of it. And I believe we've stewarded this well through the years. I really do. I believe we've been able to do and accomplish just great things in ministry here. And I just imagine that there's even greater things in ministry for us in the future as we make a move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. I hope that this has been helpful for those of you that are joining us. Just to give you a little bit of the backstory here, more about the history of Cornerstone here in Old Town, to hear a little bit more about what you've heard of the 7 Mile Miracle and the farm, and what awaits our church over the next couple of weeks. So I know that we have on our website a couple of Q&As. If you haven't been a part of one of those, that you can join in. If you have questions, if you want to get an answer or a response to those questions, sign up for one of those. And then we have a meeting that's coming up, very important meeting on November 20th. Yes. We'll be asking our members to vote on what to do with the offers in our hands. Yes. So thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks for sitting down.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Jason.
it.